Guys, we're going to start with an icebreaker this morning. I don't know how this one's going to go, but the icebreaker for this morning is talk about the last time you got punched in the face. So I'm going to start, and I'm going to tell you guys about the last time I got punched in the face. There's a story that's been going around, and there's a few guys that know it that have been around me long enough, so I felt like it was only right to tell everybody this morning. But back in college, I got beat up by a guy 5 foot tall. Yep, I was at a party one night, and I was hanging out with all my friends, and we were all drinking and having a good time, and we were with a group of ladies, and a group of guys showed up, and they started hitting on these ladies. And of course, I picked the guy that was the smallest out of the group. He just happened to stand about 5 feet tall, and I started picking on him, and started calling him a leprechaun. Well, little did I know that this guy wrestled for James Madison University. So after many taunts, we got outside, and eventually the guy had enough of my nonsense, and literally this guy knocked me down within like 2 seconds. He was on top of me, wailing on my face. And I remember, looking over at my friend, and I'm getting just tagged in the eye by this little guy. And I'm just like, just shaking my head. Like, there's nothing I could do. He had me pinned down. And so anyways, that week, I had a great story to tell all my friends about the big black eye that I carried around school. So I don't know if you guys got any good ones like that, but why don't you guys talk about that this morning? So this morning, guys, I want to actually, switch gears a little bit, but I want to talk to you about, my house. About 2 years ago, I rented out my house. I moved back in with my parents, and I had some people move in. The people that have been living there almost 2 years now. For the most part, they were fairly good about paying rent. It's always something I had to kind of wait on there that first week, but typically they would be not much farther past the 5th of each month. But in the past 4 months, it's been much different. In fact, the guy called me about 4 months ago and told me that he left his job. He went to take a job for another company that was commission-based, and the commissions didn't come in, and he couldn't pay me. And based on what this guy had experienced before, he just assumed that since he couldn't pay me, that he'd have to move out. But I made the decision that that wasn't what I wanted to do. It's not what I felt God was leading me to do. So I just said, look, let's just see if you can get yourself back together, and then we'll just kind of wait and see what happens. So that month, I think he paid me, like a month later, and then we moved into the next month, and obviously he's still trying to play catch up, so still struggling to kind of get that money in. But each time, that we met and talked, I kept saying, we'll keep working through this. Well, eventually that got to a point where it just didn't feel like it was helping the situation. So this guy's lease was supposed to end in August, and I approached him a few weeks back about the idea of just stopping in June and moving out so that he wouldn't be responsible for that last month. Thought it would help him. I thought it would help my situation since I wasn't getting money anyways. So he agreed and called me back and said that he was going to move out actually this weekend. So last Sunday I went over to the house, and I don't go over there very often, but I went over there and I thought, let me talk to him and see if maybe I can get in the house and take a look at things and just see what I'm going to need to do to get it ready to rent. Considering that he hadn't paid me rent, I didn't think it was asking too much, to go in there and take a look. And he said okay at the time, but later that day he texted me and he said in a text that he felt that I wasn't respecting his privacy, that in fact I was insulting him by wanting to come in and look at the house. He went on to say that he didn't feel that I should even come by the property. That I should wait until he moves out this Sunday or tomorrow, and I could come by then. And if I wanted to talk to him, the best way to reach him would be either through text or through email. So I don't know about you guys, but my first reaction was like anger. I was pissed. And mainly I was just pissed because who is this guy to tell me I can't go on my property? That's my right. In fact, I got a lease that says in it that if I give them a notice of 24 hours, I can go in anytime I want. So I don't know. You guys ever been in that situation? You ever been in a place where you're in the right, and you know you're right? In fact, you got maybe even law behind you to say you're right. But what do you do with that? I mean, I think we can all relate to it. I mean, maybe just think about this week. I mean, just maybe even coming here. Somebody cut you off, on your way here? Anybody ever cut you off on the road? You really just want to let them know how you feel? I think about even, in our relationships. I mean, you guys married? Read your wife. You know she's wrong. You know you're right. And you just got to let her know. I think about also, even some of the guys that, are struggling right now going through divorces. I mean, a lot of your rights are being stripped from you. And what's that look like? Does that make you happy? And bring you joy? No, I would think it would make you feel the same way I felt. Like, I got rights here, You signed over those rights to me. So anyways, with that being said, I really needed to just kind of confirm those feelings, and decided to call the cheapest attorney in town, and so I called Stephen Dunn. Cheap for me, that is. He didn't charge me anything, but no, I wanted to call Stephen. I wanted to kind of reconfirm the way I felt, and really just to see what were my rights. I mean, what is it that I'm in the right here? Because this guy clearly didn't see that. So I talked to Stephen, and I explained to him the situation. I kind of shared him a lot of the story of what's been going on in the house, and kind of how I'd been really gracious to the guy and really felt like I had really helped him out. And but at this point, I'm just really like, this is ridiculous. And he said, well, you're right. I mean, you have the rights to go in there anytime you want. But I after hearing your story, I don't think that's really what you need to do. It's like, oh, crap. He said, well, let's pray about it. And so we did. We prayed about it. And, I really started to think about what had happened. And, up to that point, I really honored God in what, He called me to do. Because really, in a sense, it really wasn't my property anyways. And I kind of knew that. But anyway, so I needed some answers. And so went to this. And, guys, I've been kind of floating around in the Gospels, and one of the areas I've been in is Matthew. So, not that I was in this, but I've been kind of around this area for a while, and I was reading this particular chapter in Matthew, and it's actually Jesus' famous Sermon on the Mount talk. And if you guys are familiar with it, it's in Matthew 5. What he's doing here is basically he's teaching these people what it's looked like to operate in the kingdom of God. See, these people had been accustomed to doing things by the law, and it says in here that that Jesus says that you think I'm here to abolish the law, but in fact I'm here to fulfill it. And what he was doing was he was really trying to show them that they got so caught up in the laws that they had really missed the real point of those laws. So, as I read through this, I began to look at what he was talking about. I mean, he talks about, murder. He says, you've heard, do not murder, which is, the sixth commandment. But he's like, I'm not talking about just murder. I'm also talking about how you treat your brother. The murder that you have in your heart for them. And, it goes on to talk about adultery, and it says, you have heard that it was said, do not commit adultery, but I tell you that anyone looks at a woman lustfully has already committed adultery with her in his heart. So God is beginning to start unravel this thing for the people there, and to say, you guys have been following these laws and these rights that you have been given, but I want you to look and to see what it really means, what it means to be in my kingdom. And although you have heard this before, this is what I'm telling you to do. So it goes on, and it talks about divorce, and it talks about your oaths and swearing. It's, let your yes be yes and your no be no. And then in verse 38, and this is the place I want to kind of camp out for a minute. This is the place where I got myself in my situation, and started to see what he was saying to the people, but really he started saying something to me. Let me read it for you. You've heard that it was said, an eye for an eye, a tooth for a tooth. But I tell you, do not resist an evil person. If someone strikes you on the right cheek, turn him the other also. If someone wants to sue you and take your tunic, let him have your cloak as well. If someone forces you to go 1 mile, go with him 2 miles. Give to the one who asks you, and do not turn away from the one who wants to borrow from you. You see, guys, so I look back, they have the little notations about, an eye for an eye, a tooth for a tooth, and it goes back to the law that was established by God through Moses. It was the law that his people were following. But that was a completely different culture then. Back then, people were killing each other for absolutely no reason.